big money, they know where this is going. And I'm going to show you what I think that they are looking at as well, and how I believe Bitcoin could go to $1 million. So first of all, let's talk about what this actually means. A quick refresher, how Bitcoin goes to $1 million. For this to happen, $1 million per Bitcoin, that equates to a total supply valuation of 21 trillion. So remember that number, 21 trillion. But there's a whole bunch more numbers we need to look at. Number of coins, 14 million. I firmly believe there will never be more than 14 million coins, despite the fact if you go to CoinMarketCap, it'll say there's nearly 18.9 million in circulation. That's not true. Between 4 and 6 million are lost, and 1 million is locked up in Satoshi. So even at that, the point is 10 million are in cold storage. It's less than 2.5 million on exchanges. There's not a lot to go around, and that's important for my thesis. Next, so what is the impact if you pump money into Bitcoin? And I believe it's about 20x. So that means if I take $1 billion out of my pocket, which of course I don't have, but if I did, and I bought and pumped it directly into Bitcoin, the impact on the price would not be $1 billion extra market capitalization, but it'd be a factor of 20x that market capitalization. So for example, an example of this is when Tesla went in and bought $1.5 billion worth. The impact of that is adding to market cap of about $30 billion, 20x. Some people believe it could be 40x, but I'm just taking a conservative 20x for this analysis as well. And again, I like to sandbag everything and be hyper conservative, but stick with me to the end. So let's look at another key chart as well, what they call the HODL wave. And here you see Bitcoin's market participants have never been more long-term focused than ever in the history of Bitcoin. Over 60% of Bitcoin supply, probably more like 70% now, has not moved in over a year. These are long-term hodlers. These are institutions. These are people like you and me that know that this is the most pristine store of value ever. So let's talk a little bit more about treasuries. Another proof point is from Cathie Wood. Her hypothetical price increase if Bitcoin were to replace cash on the S&P 500 corporate balance sheets. Now we're just talking about the S&P 500, the biggest 500 American companies. This does not take into account all of the big German companies, all the big Japanese companies, Chinese companies, just American companies. And she believes if they put 1% into Bitcoin, it would increase the price by $40,000 on top of what it is today, take it to $70,000. And if they put 10% of their balance sheets into Bitcoin, that would increase the price to $400,000. So I'm just giving you some proof points here to back up my thesis as we go forward. You'll see what we're talking about. So store of value. What is a store of value? Quick reminder. This is very important for this analysis as well. Money is not a store of value, but things like stocks, bonds, real estate, etc., equities, they are stores of value. So let's, as usual, talk about those stores of value. So first of all, I'm going to talk about 4 today for this thesis: gold, real estate, bonds, and Wall Street equities. So when we go in and look, the first one we'll look at will be the gold store of value. So here, if we imagine the thesis of 20% of people who actually use gold as a store of value today pivot and move towards Bitcoin, taking that from the current gold market cap of 12 trillion, that means a 20% move to Bitcoin would be about 2.4 trillion going into Bitcoin. Not a lot, but we've seen what $1.5 billion does to the price. I wonder what 2.4 trillion would do. So think of that 20x multiple that I used as well. So the second one is the bond market. So my bond store of value, the thesis is 10% moves to Bitcoin. Now, remember the bond market today globally is $120 trillion, and 20 trillion of those have negative yields today. And if you imagine a 10% move to Bitcoin, obviously people aren't going to sit and wait for negative yields. They're looking for alternatives, and they're scrambling to find it right now. That means 12 trillion could easily flow into Bitcoin. So I got 12 trillion on top of the 2.4 from gold. But what else is next? So let's look at equities. The total amount of equities globally is about 100 trillion. Give or take a couple of trillion, and it goes up radically all the time. And if we imagine 1% moves into Bitcoin, now what I'd say by that is 1% is very, very achievable because we're already seeing the size and the growth of the crypto exchanges and how big they are. Look at the Coinbase IPO, for example. This money, people are no longer investing in Tesla or Microsoft or Apple or who knows what else. They are investing in crypto. So again, very conservatively, I'm saying 1% of equities goes into crypto. That gives us about $1 trillion of flows. Not a big deal. Now let's look at real estate. So a lot of people now, they are actually pausing their purchase of real estate, or they are no longer using it as a store of value because they believe it's ultimately going to be taxed away by cities and governments and municipalities, etc. So if you look at the global real estate market value, about $200 trillion, 1% moves into Bitcoin. That means 20 trillion will move into Bitcoin. So let's see what we got so far. Let's crunch all these numbers I just ran through. And this is only assuming these stores of value. So we have gold, 12 trillion current value, 20% flows into Bitcoin, that's about 2.4 trillion. We've got bonds, 10% flows in, that's 12 trillion. Equities, 1 trillion. Real estate, 2 trillion. That total is $17.4 trillion. The market cap of Bitcoin today is under $1 trillion. Where is that 17.4 trillion going to go? And is it going to go? Or am I just completely crazy? Well, it's already happening. Apparently, something like 3% of the people that are holding gold are already planning to move it. So let's look at my 20x multiplier. Again, conservative. Some people say it's 25x. Some people say it's 40x. I'm taking a 20x. This would result in an increase in market cap of this funding from these four different stores of value of $348 trillion. Now, divide that by the assumed number of Bitcoin of 19 million Bitcoin, which is not 19 million by no stretch. Your price per Bitcoin theoretically could be $18.3 million. Mind-blowing. But let's go a little bit further. So let's take an ultra sandbagged version of this. And again, the time frame I'm talking about here is the next 5 to 10 years. It's not tomorrow, next 5 to 10 years. The sandbagged version is the increase in market cap, 17.4 trillion, which is basically a 1-to-1 ratio. Divided by 19 million coins, that gives you a price per Bitcoin of $915,000. Again, nearly $1 million, very easily. Now let's assume, going back to my numbers that I showed at the beginning, the 1x multiplier, again, completely unrealistic, with the true supply of coins never exceeding 14 million. That means the increase in market cap of 17.4 trillion divided by 14 million coins gives you a price per Bitcoin of $1.24 million a Bitcoin. Again, going out there to the year 2030 or whatever. Who knows when this is going to happen, but this is all theoretically possible. So, but it's important as well, just to bring a piece of reality into this as well, is the $1 million in the year 2030. What is it really worth? So, because of fiat debasement or lack or reduction in purchasing power of your dollars over the next 10 years, if you assume different inflation rates of 3%, your $1 million will actually be worth about $766,000 in 10 years. 7% inflation rate, you'll have about $543,000 in purchasing power. 10%, $424,000, and 15%, $284,000. And I know there's a lot of talk of deflation and inflation and everything else, but the important thing to consider here is we know 7% to 10% is pretty much guaranteed over the next 10 years, given the money supply. And although things like cars and flat panel TVs might get cheaper, your day-to-day expenses of education and healthcare and blueberries will all get more expensive. So watch that space. Now, $1 million Bitcoin, wrapping up here, it is theoretically very, very possible. Again, another way that I think I can convince you all that this is a pristine store of value. Now, this is one thing that Michael Saylor said on YouTube about 2 days ago. He believes Bitcoin is a 200x from here. And look at that smile, look at that confidence. Where does he get his 200x? Let's call Bitcoin $40,000. 200 times $40,000 is You can do the math and how that ties back to my other numbers I showed you as well. So there you have it. $1 million, theoretically extremely possible. And again, don't miss the boat, everybody. Everybody needs to own a little Bitcoin. Not investment advice, of course. And it's okay to be wrong, but it's not okay to stay wrong. This is a very famous quote from the past. So for those non-believers, or for those people who believe we're going back to $20,000, think of the big picture. Think of stores of value. It's absolutely critical. A big thank you to everybody on Patreon. I love working with you every day, and thanks for all the support. And that's probably the best investment community, at least I've ever come across with, and the coolest group of people. So big thanks to everybody there, and I hope you like this content. Hit the like if you haven't, and subscribe if you haven't. Take care, everybody.